Coming up today, Kim Yang-gon, North Korea's point man on inter-Korean relations and key confidant to Kim Jong-un, is dead. Pyongyang says he died in a car accident on Tuesday. With this week's landmark wartime sex slavery agreement reached, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe states that Japan will no longer apologize to the victims. He says Korea will lose credibility if it tries to backtrack on the deal. Plus, Korea's industrial output tumbled more than 2% in November, its second straight monthly fall, as the mining and manufacturing sectors had a slow month. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello, it's noon on Wednesday, the 30th of December. You're tuned in to our midday newscast here on Arirang TV. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Broom. Our top story this afternoon, North Korea state media is reporting that the country's senior official for inter-Korean affairs, Kim Yang-gon, died in a car crash early Tuesday morning. For more, we're going to connect straight away with our Unification Ministry correspondent, Connie Kim. So, Connie, what can you tell us about Kim's death?
Well, Mark, North Korea's Korean Central News Agency reported on the death of Kim Yang-gon, a secretary of the ruling Workers' Party of Korea and also a member of the party's Central Committee Politburo, saying that he died in a car accident at 6:15 a.m. on Tuesday. Now, he died at the age of 73, who was also a close aide to the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and was in charge of handling inter-Korean relations. Now, the KCNA report says Kim Jong-un will lead a state funeral for the deceased on Thursday, and Choi Ryong-hae, a senior secretary in the Workers' Party who had been out of the public eye, has been listed as a member of the funeral committee, implying he has been reinstated. And for those of you who have been following inter-Korean affairs, Kim Yang-gon may seem familiar. Now, he contributed to pulling the two Koreas back from brink of conflict after a landmine explosion near the inter-Korean border in August, which Seoul blames on Pyongyang. And he also played a leading role in bringing about a 2007 summit between then North Korean leader Kim Jong-il and then South Korean President Roh Moo-hyun.
And Connie, as you just touched upon there, Kim Yang-gon really did play a key role in inter-Korean ties. Now, what effect does everyone think his death is going to have on relations between the two Koreas?
Well, Mark, first of all, Kim Yang-gon is considered a dove in inter-Korean affairs, but many don't speculate that the death of Kim Yang-gon will have a negative impact on North-South relations. Now, this is because he was less a policymaker than one of the people tasked with carrying out the regime's policies. However, some North Korea watchers say inter-Korean dialogue could wither in the short term, given Kim's decades-long experience with inter-Korean relations. Seoul's Unification Ministry has expressed its condolences over Kim's death and says it's closely monitoring the situation. And before I go, I should also mention the growing speculation surrounding Kim Yang-gon's death, which says that Kim died not in a car crash, but as part of the young North Korean leader's ongoing efforts to maintain his grip on power. A number of top North Korean officials have been either dismissed or executed since Kim Jong-un came to power after his father died in 2011. Now, there have been many cases where North Korean officials have reportedly died in car accidents, which could be somewhat suspicious considering how few cars there are in the north. Kim Yong-sun, who was Kim Yang-gon's predecessor in charge of the United Front Department, was also killed in a car accident in 2003. Chang Song-taek, Kim Jong-un's uncle, was reportedly in 2 car accidents that almost killed him before he was executed in 2013. Well, that's all I have for now, but I'll keep you updated in our later newscast. This has been Connie Kim reporting live from Seoul's Unification Ministry. Back to you, Mark.
Thank you very much for that report, Connie. Now, in other news, the dust is settling on the landmark agreement between Korea and Japan on the wartime sex slavery issue. Critics of the deal, which includes most of the surviving victims, say it silences their international efforts to get Tokyo to take legal responsibility for its past atrocities against the women. Our Kim Yang-gon has this report.
Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has reiterated that he will no longer apologize to the victims of Japan's wartime sex slavery. He says a line has been drawn under the so-called comfort women issue with this week's landmark deal struck between Seoul and Tokyo. The Japanese daily Sankei Shinbo reported Wednesday that Abe has said that he will no longer bring up the issue with Korea as a lid had been put on it, and he had that confirmed during a telephone conversation with President Park Geun-hye. And if Korea breaks its irreversible promise, Abe said it will be the end for Korea as a credible member of the international community. The latest developments are raising concerns the deal by the two sides set a bad precedent by nullifying international efforts to criminalize and force sexual slavery during times of war. In 1996, the UN Human Rights Commission released a report referring to the women as sex slaves.
The problem of violence against women during wartime had been such an invisible issue. War II, to bring this issue up, first to give it visibility, and secondly, make it an occasion on which the Japanese government could then do something.
2 years later, another UN report called for the Japanese government to compensate the victims and consider the issue criminal acts against humanity. Up until this week's deal, Seoul had referred to these reports to pressure Tokyo. But with the new agreement, the Korean government is not allowed to criticize Japan over the issue on the international stage.
We have vowed not to criticize the Japanese government over the wartime sex slavery issue, assuming Tokyo takes the necessary steps outlined in the resolution.
Civic groups representing the victims have expressed their deep disappointment with the deal. They say the hastily drawn-up agreement failed to mention Japan's legal responsibility on the matter. The vast majority of the surviving victims say they will ignore the agreement and continue striving for justice. Kim Yang-gon, Arirang News.
Now, Korea's industrial output dropped for the second straight month in November due to sluggish exports. Business sentiment also worsened this month. Our Hwang Ji-ae has the details.
Statistics Korea says output across all industries slid 0.5% in November from a month earlier, marking 2 straight months of decline. The agency attributes the slump to a drop in production in the mining and manufacturing sectors that were hit hard by sluggish outbound shipments. Exports have dropped every month this year through November, and in October, they plunged nearly 16%, the biggest drop since the height of the global financial crisis 6 years ago. And experts say the unfavorable conditions abroad are unlikely to improve anytime soon.
The growth rate is getting weaker in emerging economies and in China, on which Korean exports have relied heavily for the past 2 to 3 years.
The slump in industrial output has come about despite an improvement in domestic demand, with production in the service sector rising for a 5th straight month in November. Although retail sales went down by around 1%, the figure was still 5.5% higher than it was at the same time a year ago. The on-month drop is attributed to a high base rate in the previous month that came on the back of major sales events initiated by the government to spur consumption. Reflecting the gloomy production data, manufacturers' business sentiment also declined this month. The index gauging how businesses see the current economic conditions came in at 67, down a point from the previous month. A reading under 100 means pessimists outnumber optimists. Hwang Ji-ae, Arirang News.
Korea's air passenger traffic rose in November, with over 7.6 million people flying abroad and within the country. The Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport says the nation's air passenger count jumped 14.1% last month compared to a year before. A large increase in domestic passengers bumped up the total, with a 15% rise over the same period. The number of passengers travelling abroad increased by nearly 14%. The growth in the number of international passengers is attributed to growth in flights by low-cost carriers. More visitors from abroad and Koreans' rising demand for overseas travel. The Korean government is looking to ease its duty-free license system, which could allow cities other than Seoul and Jeju to establish new downtown duty-free stores. The current system requires each region to report an on-year increase of 300,000 foreign tourists. The proportion of both the number of foreign users and sales of the region's current duty-free stores must also surpass 50%. The government is also looking to reform the 5-yearly bidding process for licenses introduced in 2013, which resulted in Lotte duty-free and Walker Hill duty-free stores losing their permits. This comes after President Park Geun-hye slammed lawmakers on Monday for changing the license system without adequate debate. According to government authorities, the Korea Customs Service has come up with a draft for the revised customs law. Now, could the world's energy firms be facing a new crisis? According to data by Standard & Poor's Capital IQ, 58 firms filed for bankruptcy protection this year, up from just 20 last year. And it's also the second highest figure since the aftermath of the global financial crisis in 2009, when the corresponding number hit 95. The sharp increase this year is attributed to a drop in raw material prices, including crude oil and natural gas, which in turn decreased the profitability of those companies. Airstrikes from a US-led coalition have killed 10 Islamic State leaders in Iraq and Syria in the last month. Giving a briefing in Baghdad on Tuesday, Washington spokesperson for the campaign against ISIS, Steve Warren, said that one of them, French national Sharaf al-Moadan, had direct links to the ringleader of the terror attacks on Paris in November. The US Army colonel said al-Moadan was killed in Syria on December 24th. He said the US will continue to hunt ISIS leaders who are working to recruit, plan and inspire attacks against the United States. And a double hit for ISIS because Syrian government forces have retaken a strategic town from the Islamic State militant group. The army is advancing rapidly against both ISIS and anti-government rebels with support of Russian airstrikes. Son Jong-in has the details.
Syrian military forces on Tuesday succeeded in recapturing the key town of Mahin and its surrounding hilltops from the Islamic State group. According to state news agency Sana, the army destroyed terrorist hideouts and fortifications with air support from Russian jets, which have been pounding militants in the area for nearly 3 months. Mahin, located southeast of Homs, was deemed crucial to ISIS due to its strategic location. Earlier in the day, Syrian government forces recaptured a key southern military base from Brigade 82 rebels in the town of Sheikh al-Maskin. The regime forces seized the base a day after taking the northern part of the town in Dera province, which was captured by rebels around a year ago. The state news agency said the army inflicted heavy losses on the militants but did not release an official death toll. The latest developments are expected to boost President Bashar al-Assad's position ahead of peace talks in Geneva next month. The United Nations plans to bring together Syria's warring parties on January 25th to begin talks to try and end nearly 5 years of civil war. Son Jong-in, Arirang News.
Now over in Pakistan, a suicide bombing outside a government office in Islamabad has killed at least 26 people and seriously injured dozens more. According to local police, the attacker rammed his motorbike into the main gate of the office building and detonated his explosives. A faction of the Pakistani Taliban has claimed responsibility for the attack. The militant group is known to be fighting to overthrow the government and establish hardline Islamist rule. The group's spokesman said it targeted the office because it's part of Pakistan's anti-terror war. Now, eastern China is continuing to suffer from its worst smog of the year. According to China's National Weather Agency, levels of PM2.5 in parts of Beijing reached 543 micrograms per cubic meter last night, and that is more than 20 times higher than the World Health Organization's recommended maximum exposure. The figure is also higher than when Beijing issued 2 red smog alerts earlier this month. However, the authorities only issued a yellow alert this time around, the second highest alert in the country's four-tier system. Other parts of China have also been really badly affected by this new round of heavy smog, including Tianjin and the neighbouring province of Hebei. Luckily for the residents of the Chinese capital, a cold front is gradually dispersing the smog on this Wednesday, but it is expected to get worse again from Thursday. Well, that's all we have for now on this Wednesday lunchtime here in Seoul. Thank you as always for watching, and we'll be back throughout the day with more newscasts. Until then, goodbye.